Welcome, everyone, to the Next Best Picture podcast, where we are talking with Ryan White, the director of See Me in the Good Light. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for chatting.
I'm very excited to speak with you about this beautiful film, which I first saw at this year's Sundance Film Festival. And I have not stopped thinking about it since, especially since we learned of the subject Andrea Gibson's passing in July. And I wanted to start by asking you how this project got started. Did you know Andrea and her partner Meg beforehand, or did they come to you? How did you get involved?
Yeah, so Andrea is a very well-known spoken word artist, but that's not an area of expertise of mine. So I had never heard of Andrea Gibson before this. But I was friends with Tig Notaro, who's our producer. I'm sure most people know Tig Notaro, the stand-up comedian. And Tig and I, we go back over a decade. And so we've been saying to Tig, for a long time, like, bring us a funny idea for a documentary. Like, why can't documentaries be funnier? And Tig loves documentaries. And so she
Funny
called,
is a funny word for this.
exactly. She called a couple years ago, and this documentary could not sound less funny
Yeah.
when it's pitched in a log line. It leads with the words poetry, cancer, non-binary. It sounds like the most serious film in the world. And
Yeah.
Tig, we love and we trust. And Tig said, listen, this is one of my best friends over the last few decades. They've known each other for a very long time. And she said, Andrea is the rock star of poetry, and Andrea is one of the funniest people I've ever known, which a funny poet was sort of news to me. But Tig sent us some links to Andrea's performances and a couple interviews with Andrea.
Mm.
And it really blew my mind. The performances were unlike anything I'd ever seen before. It was this combination of art forms, almost like stand-up comedy meets poetry, but there's music and there's storytelling. So I was really blown away with the artistry. But when I heard Andrea's interviews, and they had been diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer, which had been deemed incurable, so they were seemingly reaching end of life. And the way that Andrea was talking about mortality, honestly, it was scary to me as someone who's not very comfortable with my own mortality or my loved one's mortality. But the way they were talking about it was so remarkable, was so different than anything I had ever heard before. That we said to Tig, like, if Andrea wants to meet us, we'll just fly there. So we did. We'd never spoken with Andrea or Megan. We flew to Colorado where they lived, and met them and started shooting that day and never
Oh, wow.
stopped for the next year. We ended up, what ended up being the final year, a little bit over a year, the final year of their life together, this beautiful
Oh
love
my
story
gosh.
as they were reaching the end of Andrea's life. And we couldn't get enough. We just wanted to be there as much as possible. It felt like a gift getting to be with this couple as they went through
Yeah.
this and them allowing us inside of their love story. Um, so really, truly the most special that, I think it's my 14th or 15th documentary, and it is the
Mm.
most special filmmaking experience of my life getting to make this.
That's really beautiful to hear, both how it came about and that you basically started filming the day you went out to meet them the first time. That's really incredible. I'm curious, did you have to push Andrea and Meg to open up at all, or were they completely comfortable with you filming right from the start?
So comfortable. I don't know what's wrong with them. Some things they're missing a part of their DNA that most people have. That's a really reasonable part of DNA that's skeptical of documentary filmmakers. Because usually I spend, you know, months, if sometimes years, warming people up
Mm.
to be comfortable. The best example of this is we have a scene in our film that's probably our funniest scene that's about fingering, the sexual act, and
Yes.
it turns into thumbing, a conversation around thumbing. That was literally the day I met Andrea. That was that first day of
Re-
filming.
oh my gosh. And her friend was there too,
Steph
right? Yeah.
Willen, she's actually our producer. So it was
Okay.
Tig and Steph are the ones that were kind of the intermediaries. So I think because Andrea trusted Tig and Steph so much,
Mm.
and they were vouching for us. Tig was saying like these are the right filmmakers to make it. I think you're gonna love them. That we all just hit it off right away, and they were just like ready to go from day one. So like I never once had to push them. In fact, I was very uncomfortable. I remember that first day I met them, I was walking on eggshells, feeling like I had never made an end of life documentary. And again, like I said, it's not something I'm personally comfortable with. So I felt very invasive entering their home. Like, oh, how am I going to do this as a filmmaker? How am I going to broach this with them? How am I going to, be sensitive and gentle while they go through this? And they very quickly like grabbed my hand metaphorically, and I had to do none of that sort of diplomatic directing that I often have to do. They were just ready to go. And so literally never once during the year that we filmed was there ever something where Andrea said, "Could you not document this, or do you mind not coming today?"
Mm.
Or a refrain that often happened in the filming was we would walk into the house and Meg would say, "Andrea's having a really hard day. They're upstairs crying, or they're in a lot of pain on the bathroom floor. But they told you, this is Meg, I'm quoting. Meg would say, but they said you should come up." Uh, so we would tiptoe up the stairway where Andrea would be and just start rolling and talking to them. And so um, really, we felt a massive invitation into all aspects of Andrea's journey. And so I never had to feel that invasive feeling after that first day. Uh, yeah, it was really like an incredible act of vulnerability, I think, on both their parts.
That's really good to hear that because that's something that I was thinking about while watching the film. Like, I don't know that I would be able to, even if, like, given history as a documentarian, if I would feel comfortable sitting in the background and during these incredibly intimate, private moments with
Yeah.
them. But that openness, I would imagine, changes that feeling a little.
Yeah, and I've Andrea died in July, but I heard them say this enough in the 6 months since the film came out, and I've heard Megan say it a ton. Like, we became a part of the family, so we were like, they were super quarantined because this diagnosis began during COVID, and then Andrea was just very sick, so they weren't even around a lot of friends and family, and so we would test for COVID and other things like crazy before any shoot. So once we went into that home, which was a very sacred space, and it was only four of us on this crew. So we became like a part of this family to the point where Brandon Selmerhalder is our DP, and we have the same sound person. His name's Dave Richards, which is rare in documentaries. Oftentimes, you use different sound people on different shoots.
Mm.
But Andrea and Meg love Dave so much, and he lives in Seattle. We would fly him in for every shoot. So Brandon was so a part of the fabric, the DP, that like if Andrea is on the bathroom floor crying, we can't fit in there. Brandon could go in there alone and be with Andrea. He was the only one that would go into the chemo treatments with Andrea and Meg because they could only have one extra person. Or he would go into the doctor's visits, uh, and so it wouldn't feel like there was a crew there. So even I wouldn't go into that room. Dave would be holding the boom, and sobbing while he was filming a scene to the point where I'd have to ask Dave, like, you can't cry so much because Andrea and Meg love you, and then they're worried about you, and then they're saying like someone needs to give Dave a hug, you know?
Oh,
So, and like Dave was actually the last person to see of our crew before Andrea died. Like he flew there the day before Andrea died to say goodbye. And then he was back there a week later helping Meg while she was grieving after Andrea
oh,
died and just helping around the house. So I can't exaggerate enough how much of a family feeling it was amongst our crew. It was love, like which breaks every rule in the documentary handbook. You know, like the traditional documentary handbook would say you keep a journalistic arm's
yeah.
length from your subject and you don't go there. And it just wasn't, that wasn't the right fit for this film. So the six of us were just incredibly close.
It's really beautiful to hear. And you mentioned, that the house, you said that it was sort of like a sacred space for them. And there are so many spaces in that house that feel like it has perfect lighting for
Yeah.
for filming. I'm thinking particularly the first shot of her reading one of her poems when we see it at her, it looks like her writing desk, and you have these two windows right above her on the other side of the frame. That it's just like perfect lighting. How much did you have to stage some of these shots, or was the house just like that?
No, we were very, very lucky. Nothing was staged because
Mm,
Andrea and Meg, they're too natural that if we had moved things around or changed situations, I think they would have felt uncomfortable or it would have thrown them off in the process. So yeah, I mean they live in outside of Boulder, but it's pretty rural. It's close to the city, but it's like it feels like you're in the middle of the mountains out there. So the natural light is gorgeous. Like for Brandon, for being stuck in a home, because this documentary really only has two locations. It's their home and it's the hospital. So for being stuck in a home, the amount of light and we never brought lights, so nothing in our film is lit.
wow.
All natural light or lights that they have in their house. Uh, there's a sign on the outside of their house that they had made that says Brokeback Mountain, which I found hilarious from the beginning that that's what they had named their house. But that was really Brandon and my inspiration was shooting this film like a Western. Like the film is really, it's not handheld like
Yeah.
most documentaries, or at least my documentaries are very handheld films. What we would do is we would pick a room in the house and Brandon would go on the tripod. And so he was constantly having to move around a tripod to get coverage of a scene because it was
Mm,
just one camera. But we would pick the room and then we would just let the scene unfold in front of us. And I say scene, I mean, this is just people living their
right.
life. And so we would try, at night, we would try that. Luckily, they had tons of neon light in their house. They love
Mm,
neon signs that they had made. So we were able to go into rooms that had this really vibrant, saturated colors. Like there's an interview with Megan in our interview in our film that's like very pink. That's
yeah.
in the basement of their house where they have these pink neon lights. Uh, so I think we thought at the beginning, like, oh, this is going to be terrible that we have to shoot just in this little house. And in the end, I think it was like a cinematographer's dream for Brandon.
Yeah, sure. It certainly looks like it. Um, Another of my favorite aspects of the film is Blake Neely's score, that which is so it feels like you use it really perfectly. It's used very sparingly throughout to heighten these emotions in very specific moments. But this movie, just the content of Andrea and Megan living is so emotional. I'm curious, how did you work with Blake to keep the music from feeling too over the top or too insistent, like you're leading the audience too
Yeah.
much?
Yeah, well, I think this Blake and I have worked together for a really long time since the beginning of of my career. So in some ways, that's like a marriage as well. But I can, because we have such a close relationship, I can get him involved very early in my films instead of having to score them, at the end once you've locked picture, which I think is what happens in a lot of films. And this film, I think this film seems like it would be easy because it's such a simple film and there's not a lot of like action or anything. So on face value, it probably seems like it would be, an easy film to score. It was one of our hardest films in those
Mhm.
15 or whatever. We had to try a lot that didn't work before we found something that did. And it's funny you're asking that because I go back to Brokeback Mountain. That was a big
Mhm.
once we shot that sign and that sign made it into the film because we tried lots of different types of orchestration and sound instrumentation. Strings for a cancer movie just felt so melodramatic. And so once we went with like sort of more of a classic Western feel, and I actually rewatched Brokeback Mountain, and we tried like a very simple guitar led score, which we had never done in our scores before. It felt like it fit right away because it was just very sparing, like you said. It was very bare bones, but it felt like it fit the location. Then we were like, we're on to something here. But it took us a really, really long time to come up with it for this film.
It sounds wonderful. It's a perfect complement to the content of the film. It really seems like in the setting, like you said, it's a perfect Western setting. And my other question about the music specifically, you have this beautiful end credit song with Sarah Bareilles and Brandy Carlisle, who collaborated with Andrea on the lyrics. How did this come about?
Yeah, so I mean that's a total dream collaboration,
Yeah.
obviously. So I had this idea and I had expressed it to Andrea from the beginning because they're spoken word artists that the movie would end with some sort of original poem that they wrote. And quite a few of the poems in our film are originals. Like they didn't exist in a book beforehand. Andrea wrote them, not for the movie, but while we were making the movie. Quite a few of them. But Andrea and I would often talk about like how we're going to end this film. And I said, I want it to be your words. So we kind of thought maybe that the end credits would have a poem in them in some ways. What I didn't know is that Sarah and Brandy independently were massive Andrea Gibson fans, like to the point where Sarah Bareilles was at Andrea's live show, which ends my film.
Oh,
It was
wow.
it was in Denver, and Sarah came to that, like not as Sarah Bareilles. She came, in a mask, I think in a hat. No one knew who
Wow.
she was, and she knows Glennon Doyle and Abby Wambach, who are my executive producers, and they were there as well, and they recognized her and said, like, Sarah, what are you doing here? And Sarah said, I'm a huge Andrea fan. I flew out to see this live show. And so they connected me with Sarah. Sarah ended up becoming an executive producer of the film. Same thing happened with Brandy and Kath Carlisle. Kath is Brandy's wife. They got involved as executive producers too, and we're huge fans of the poetry. Sarah and Brandy are friends. And so I had a phone call with Sarah, and Sarah said, I've always wanted to reach out to Andrea and see if we could collaborate in some way because their poetry. Sarah was going through her own things, and Andrea's
Mm.
poetry had meant a lot to them. Um, and I said, like, let me talk to Andrea about it. And so Andrea had written all of these potential possibilities. They wanted the film to end on, sounds cheesy, but on a very joyful note. They didn't want the final
Yeah.
words to be sad. They wanted to leave the audience with some very specific ideas. Um, and so they weren't actually speaking because Andrea was going through, a lot of medical issues at the time. And they basically said, here are my words, give them to Sarah and Brandy, and I am okay with whatever they come up with. Tell them to make it more beautiful. And so Sarah and Brandy did that. And so in the end, it's this. amazing love poem. It's a duet, so it sounds as if it just I think of it as Andrea and Meg singing to one another, but it's
Yes.
Sarah and Brandy and their voices together on the chorus. And yeah, total dream. And I think, posthumously now that Andrea's not with us, the fact that they wrote this song with two incredible artists and singers. I can't wait for the movie to come out and for the song to be released because it's just got it's more than just a song. It's Andrea's final words to the audience. So I'm so grateful to Sarah and Brandy for joining our film in that way.
It's a beautiful way to end the film, and I know we're coming up at the end of our time together, but before we leave, I have to ask because the footage you have in the movie of that final live reading of Andrea's is so fantastic. And I was just sitting there recently rewatching it and thinking like, could we possibly get a concert movie sometime soon? Like, is that footage, does it exist of the whole show? Can we see that maybe?
I think you will. I think that's our plan. So yeah, Tig obviously has done a million specials, stand-up
Mhm.
comedy specials, and I had her as my producer, so she really helped guide us in the way of, we knew that was going to be the climax of the film. Andrea was desperate to do a final live show, and it didn't seem like it was going to be possible with their health. And in this very brief peak in their cancer journey, they had a window to do it where they were healthy enough. And so we knew it was going to be a huge scene in our film, but then we talked to Tig about like, well, how do we shoot this in a way that, we're shooting it for the documentary, but we're also shooting it in a way that it could exist as a standalone special, kind of unlike I don't know what to liken it to. Maybe like a Hannah Gadsby special, but even that's kind of that doesn't involve poetry as much. And so we do. I don't know where it's going to land, but we have, the full version of Andrea's live show. It will always be Andrea's final live show. It will also be Andrea's only live show that was ever shot that way, like a special. Um, and so it will. We have it. It will come out at some point. I'm hoping with the release of the documentary that it introduces Andrea as a person and as an artist to so many more people that we can build a massive audience for that live show.
Well, I certainly think that the movie has not left my mind since I saw it earlier, and watching it again in preparation for this, it hit me the exact same way. So I could not agree more. I think this is a perfect introduction to Andrea for so many people, and I look forward to seeing the full concert someday. That's a really special thing that got to happen, and I'm so glad that that's part of your plan. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have, but it's been fantastic talking to you, Ryan, about this film. Thank you so much for the film and for joining us today.
No, thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.